What my son and his wife did not know was that every account they planned to drain, every deed they thought they controlled, every asset they believed was already theirs, had been moved 6 months before they made their first move. I am Walter Haynes. I am 64 years old. I spent 31 years building a construction company in Columbus, Ohio, with nothing but a used pickup truck, a set of tools I bought on credit, and a work ethic my own father burned into me before I turned 16. And this is how I watched my son and his wife try to take everything I built, and how I made sure they walked away with nothing but the sound of a door closing behind them. I need you to understand something before I tell you the rest. I was not a perfect father. I worked too much when my son was young. I missed school plays. I missed a birthday or two. I carried that guilt for years. And Marcus knew it. He knew exactly where to press to make me feel like I owed him something. And for a long time, I paid that debt. I paid it with money, with silence, with patience that should have run out a decade earlier. My wife, Carol, passed 8 years ago. Breast cancer. She was 57. After she died, the house got very quiet. My son was 31 at the time, already married to Nicole, already living 40 minutes away in a house I had helped him buy. He called more often after his mother died. He came around on Sundays. He brought my grandson Tyler, who was just a baby then, and I would sit in the backyard holding that little boy and feel like maybe things were going to be all right. I thought my son was coming back to me out of love. I understand now it was something else. The business was doing well, better than well. We had contracts with 3 school districts and a partnership with a commercial developer that was bringing in more money than I had seen in my best years. My accountant told me I was sitting on a net worth just under $4 million when you counted the business equity, the properties, and my retirement accounts. I did not tell many people that number. I told my son. I told him because I thought he was my son and I was proud and I wanted him to know that what his father had built mattered. That was my first mistake. Things changed slowly, the way things always do when someone is trying to take from you. It does not happen all at once. It happens in small steps, each one reasonable enough on its own, until one day you look around and realize the ground has shifted under your feet and you are standing somewhere you never agreed to go. Nicole started calling me more. She was pleasant, attentive, full of small suggestions. Maybe I should think about updating my will. Maybe I should consider adding Marcus to the business accounts, just in case something happened to me. Maybe I should look into a trust, she said, because she had been reading about estate planning and it would protect the family. She always said it that way. The family. As if she and Marcus and Tyler and I were all one unit with the same interests pointing in the same direction. My son stopped asking about my health and started asking about my finances. He wanted to know about the commercial contracts. He asked once, very casually, whether I had thought about retirement. I told him I was not ready. He smiled and said, "Of course. No rush. Just thinking about the future." A few months later he asked again. And again a few months after that. Each time the question came wrapped in concern. "You work so hard, Dad. You've earned a rest. You should travel. Let someone else carry the weight for a while." He meant himself. He meant, let me carry the business, let me carry the accounts, let me carry everything, and you go somewhere quiet and out of the way. I want to tell you exactly when I knew. I can give you the day, the hour, almost the minute. It was a Tuesday in March. Tyler was 6 years old. I had driven over to pick him up from school because Nicole had a hair appointment and Marcus was supposedly in a meeting. I picked my grandson up, took him to get ice cream, brought him back to their house. Nicole was already home. I came inside to use the bathroom, and as I walked past the home office, I heard her on the phone. She did not hear me come in. She was talking to someone and she said, clear as a bell, "He won't last 5 more years with the stress he's under. And when he's gone, it's all ours. Just stop pushing so fast. We have to do this the right way." I stood in that hallway for 10 seconds, maybe 15. Then I walked to the bathroom, washed my hands, came back out, kissed my grandson on top of his head. I did not say a word. I want you to understand that silence. I had just heard my daughter-in-law describe waiting for my death as a financial strategy, And I smiled, and I talked about ice cream, because in that moment I understood that the only advantage I had was that they did not know I had heard. And I was not going to waste that advantage by being angry in the wrong room at the wrong time. I called my lawyer the next morning, not the one Marcus knew about. I had used a man named Raymond for basic business work for years, and Marcus had met him at company events. So I called a different lawyer, a woman named Patricia, who had been recommended to me by my accountant. I told her everything. I told her what I had heard and what I suspected and what I had given my son and his wife over the years and what I was afraid they were planning. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Walter, the most important thing you can do right now is nothing that looks like anything." I asked her what that meant. She said it meant I needed to keep behaving exactly as I had been behaving. Keep taking the Sunday dinners, keep answering the phone calls, keep smiling at the right moments. While I did that, she and I would quietly begin moving pieces into position. She said, "By the time they make their move, there will be nothing left for them to take." That was March. What followed was 6 months of the most careful, deliberate work I have ever done in my life. And I have built buildings from the ground up. I know what careful work looks like. Patricia walked me through every asset. We restructured the business. I was no longer the sole owner of record. The business was transferred into a trust with conditions so specific that Marcus could not benefit from it unless he had actively worked in the business for 3 years, which he had not. The commercial properties were moved into a separate LLC. My retirement accounts already had beneficiary designations that bypassed my estate entirely. We updated everything. My personal accounts were restructured. I kept one account with Marcus's name on it, a joint account we had opened 2 years earlier when he had talked me into it for convenience. I kept money in it, enough to look like things were normal, enough that he had no reason to think anything had changed. The whole time, I kept going to Sunday dinners. I kept accepting the phone calls. I kept answering Nicole's questions about my health, my stress levels, my plans. I told her I had been thinking about slowing down. I told her the doctor wanted me to take better care of myself. I watched her eyes every time I said something like that, and I saw what was in them, and I kept my face perfectly still. Tyler was the hardest part. My grandson was 7 by then, and I had started to notice things about how he was being raised that bothered me more than I could explain. He flinched sometimes when Nicole raised her voice. He had started apologizing for things that were not his fault. Once, when I was playing cards with him at the kitchen table, and I made a small joke that came out wrong, he looked at me with a fear in his eyes that had no business being in a 7-year-old's face. After I laughed and corrected myself, he relaxed slowly, like a faucet being turned down. Not off, down. I mentioned this to Patricia. She said it was worth noting, but we would address it at the right time. My son called me on a Thursday evening in early September. He said he and Nicole had been thinking and they really felt it was time for me to step back from the business. He said it lovingly, with the same careful packaging he always used. He said they had been talking to a financial advisor, he did not say which one, and I did not ask, and they thought it made sense for Marcus to take over day-to-day operations and for me to transition into a consulting role. He said the word consulting the way people say it when they mean out of the way. I told him it sounded like something worth discussing. I told him to give me a couple of weeks to think it over. He said, "Of course, no rush, take your time, just thinking about the future." 3 days later, I came home to find that someone had accessed the joint checking account and moved $47,000 out of it. I sat at my kitchen table with my bank notification on my phone, and I read that number 3 times. Then I called Patricia. She said, "I expected this. Are you ready?" I told her I was. The next morning, I went to the bank and closed the joint account entirely. I transferred the remaining balance, about $12,000, to an account Marcus had no access to. Then I called the business and told my operations manager that Marcus was not to be given any financial information or access to any accounts under any circumstances, effective immediately, and that if he showed up and made a scene, she should call me and then call the police. Then I went home, and I did not call my son. He called me 2 days later. I did not answer. He called 4 more times that day. I did not answer. He drove to my house that evening. I watched his car pull into the driveway from the upstairs window. I watched him knock on the door. I watched him stand there for a while. I watched him get back in his car and leave. Nicole texted me that night. She said they were worried about me. She said they just wanted to talk. She said family should be able to work through things together. I did not respond. What I did instead was file the paperwork Patricia had prepared, a formal request through Family Services to have Tyler's home situation reviewed based on what I had observed over the past year. Patricia had told me this was a separate matter from the financial dispute, and that it needed to be handled carefully and without accusation beyond what I had directly witnessed. We documented everything I had seen, the flinching, the excessive apologizing, the fear response. One incident in particular where Marcus had grabbed Tyler by the arm in front of me, and I had not said anything, but had written it down in the Notes app on my phone that same evening, the date and the time and exactly what I saw. I want to stop here for a moment because I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking, he is a grandfather in a financial dispute, and now he is using his grandson as leverage. I need you to hear me clearly. Tyler was not leverage. Tyler was the reason I had not walked away and let all of it go. The money did not matter to me the way it once had. I was 64 years old. I had enough. But my grandson was growing up in a household where something was wrong, and I had watched it getting worse for 2 years, and the financial scheme was just the moment it all became clear enough to act on. I was not using my grandson. I was trying to reach him. The Family Services review took 3 weeks. A caseworker named Miss Ellison visited the home twice and spoke with Tyler at school, privately, without his parents present. I do not know exactly what Tyler said. I know what happened afterward, which was that Miss Ellison called me and said that based on her assessment, she had significant concerns and was recommending that Tyler spend a period of time in my care while the household situation was further evaluated. Marcus called me 45 minutes after that caseworker's visit. He was not using his careful packaging voice. He was using the voice underneath it, the one I had heard glimpses of over the years, but never this fully, never this loud. He said I had gone too far. He said I had no right. He said he was going to contact a lawyer and take me to court and make sure I never saw Tyler again. I waited for him to stop. Then I said, Marcus, I moved everything 6 months ago. There is nothing in my name for you to inherit. The business is in a trust you cannot access. The properties are in an LLC. The accounts you knew about are closed. If you want to talk to a lawyer, that is your right. But I think before you do, you should understand what you are actually working with. The silence on the other end of that phone call lasted a long time. He said, You knew. I said, I knew in March. Another silence. Then he asked me how. I told him about the hallway, about the phone call, about the ice cream and the new flavor I had mentioned to Nicole while I stood there knowing exactly what she had said. He said, Dad, I said, I'm not ready to talk yet. I need some time. What I am ready to do is take care of Tyler while your household is being evaluated, if you will allow that voluntarily. If you won't, we can do it the other way. But I am asking you to let me do this the gentle way. He did not say anything for a long time. I could hear him breathing. Then he said, Okay. Tyler came to stay with me the following weekend. He arrived with a backpack that was too small for everything he had packed into it, and his shoelaces were untied. And he stood at my front door looking at me with an expression I could not fully read. I reached down and tied his shoes. Then I stood up and told him I had bought the ingredients for his grandmother's chicken soup because I had been practicing the recipe and I needed an honest opinion. He looked at me for another moment, and then he said, Grandma's soup is hard to get right. I said, I know. That's why I need help. He came inside. The legal proceedings took 4 months. I want to spare you the details that do not matter and give you the ones that do. Marcus and Nicole had, in fact, consulted a lawyer, 2 lawyers actually. Both of them told Marcus the same thing Patricia had already told me in reverse. There was nothing to contest. The trust was legal, properly structured, and ironclad. The LLC was legitimate. The joint account funds that had been removed were a different matter, and Patricia had filed a civil claim for their return, which Marcus ultimately settled by paying back 39,000 of the 47 without a court fight. The remaining 8,000, Patricia told me, was not worth the cost of pursuing. I told her to donate it to a children's literacy organization in Carol's name. The family services matter was resolved in a way I had not fully anticipated and was not sure I deserved. The evaluation concluded that, while there was no evidence of physical abuse, there were documented patterns of emotional volatility in the home that warranted a parenting intervention program. Marcus and Nicole were required to complete a 12-week parenting course as a condition of closing the case. Nicole fought this loudly and bitterly and said things about me in paperwork that I will not repeat. Marcus completed the course quietly. I do not know what that means for who he is or who he might become. I am still deciding what to make of it. Tyler stayed with me for 3 months. 3 months of chicken soup and backyard catch, and a bedtime routine that involved him picking any book off the shelf in the guest room and me reading until he fell asleep, which usually took about 4 pages. He stopped flinching at raised voices about 6 weeks in. I noticed it one afternoon when I dropped a pot lid in the kitchen and made a crash loud enough to bring him running from the other room, not because he was frightened, but because he wanted to know what happened. I stood there holding the pot lid and thought about how small a thing it was. A 7-year-old running toward a noise instead of away from it. I thought about Carol. I thought about what she would have said. I think she would have said, "Took you long enough." She would not have been wrong. The last day of the formal evaluation period, I sat across a conference table from my son. Just the 2 of us. No lawyers, no Nicole, no caseworker. This had been Marcus's request, and I had agreed to it. He looked older than he had 6 months before. I do not say that with satisfaction. He was my son, and he looked tired and a little lost in a way that reminded me of how he looked at 9 years old the night I came home too late to see his school play about the American Revolution. He had waited up for me. He had his costume on. He told me what he missed, and I sat on the edge of his bed in my work clothes and listened. He sat across from me now and said he was sorry. He said it simply, without decoration, and I watched his face while he said it to see if I believed him. I did not know what I believed. I told him that. He said he knew he had no right to ask me for anything. He said he understood if I needed distance. He said the one thing he was asking, the only thing, was that Tyler be allowed to have his grandfather. I told him that was never in question. I told him Tyler would always have me. He nodded. He looked at the table. Then I said, "I need you to understand something, Marcus. Everything I built because I believed in something. I believed that honest work meant something, that what you earn is yours in a way that what you take is not. I wanted to give that to you. I thought I had. Somewhere it went wrong. And I don't know all the reasons, and I am old enough now to accept that some of those reasons are mine. But I will not apologize for protecting what I spent my life building, and I will not apologize for protecting that little boy." He said he understood. I do not know if he did. I think maybe understanding is something that comes slowly, the way the original damage did, in small steps over time, each one almost invisible. Tyler is 8 now. He comes to my house every other weekend and one evening during the week. Last Tuesday, we made a birdhouse from a kit he picked out at the hardware store. It took us 2 hours and came out slightly crooked, and he thought that was the funniest thing he had ever seen. He named the birdhouse Gerald. I do not know why. I did not ask. The business is still running. I still consult. I go in 2 days a week and drink bad coffee and argue pleasantly with my operations manager about scheduling, and I feel useful in a way that I would not feel sitting somewhere quiet and out of the way. My son and I talk on the phone once a week. It is careful, the way new things are careful, but it is something. Nicole and I do not speak, and I have made my peace with that. I have been asked, more than once, whether I feel guilty, whether I think I was too hard, too calculated, too cold in how I handled all of it. I have thought about this seriously. I want to give you an honest answer. I think the coldest thing I could have done was nothing. I think watching that household close around my grandson and saying nothing because I did not want the conflict, that would have been the true failure. The patience I practiced, the silence I kept, the 6 months of planning, none of that was cold to me. It was the most careful love I knew how to give at the time. It was what I had. Carol used to say that the best thing you can do for the people you love is show them clearly what the world actually is, not what you wish it was, not what you tell them it is in order to protect their feelings, what it actually is. She said, people who grow up knowing the real thing can handle it. People who grow up with the pretend version fall apart the first time the pretend version cracks. I think about that every time Tyler and I are building something together. Crooked birdhouses, chicken soup, a set of chores I make him do every Saturday morning when he stays over. Because learning that effort is part of life is something I am not going to skip this time. He complained about the chores once. He said his friends did not have to do chores at their grandparents' houses. I told him his friends' grandparents were missing out. He thought about that for a second. Then he picked up the broom and started sweeping. I am Walter Haynes. I am 64 years old. I watched my son and his wife plan to wait me out, outlast me, inherit what I had spent my life building, as if endurance were the same thing as deserving. I did not fight them loudly. I did not rage. I moved quietly in the dark while they were not watching, and I made sure that when the moment came, there was nothing left for them to take that I had not already chosen to give. I gave Tyler my time and my patience, and a slightly crooked birdhouse named Gerald. That is the only inheritance that was ever mine to hand over.